What if the love of your life was only borrowing your heart to mourn someone else? Emma believed she'd found something real with Julian, a romance steeped in music, moonlight, and the quiet magic of Florence. But when shadows of his past return, she's forced to confront a truth far more painful than betrayal. She was never the muse, only the echo. Hello family, welcome to Storytime with Imzi. Please subscribe and like, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The rain had been steady since dawn, a soft, insistent drizzle that painted the cobblestones of Florence in blurred reflections. Emma clutched her damp novel to her chest as she stepped into the station, shaking droplets from her coat like a cat. Her train was late, of course, and the platform buzzed with the quiet frustration of morning commuters. She hated delays, but she didn't mind the pause today. The rain had made everything feel cinematic. She found a dry bench beneath the wide iron overhang and sat, adjusting her scarf. The book in her lap was worn at the edges, the bell jar, her third time reading it, and she flipped it open to a dog-eared page. That's when she noticed him. A man seated a few feet away, staring at the floor with headphones in, one foot tapping to a rhythm only he could hear. He looked young, but not quite a student, maybe late 20s. Hair slightly overgrown, the kind of brown that could seem gold in sunlight, and a green wool coat with fraying cuffs. He looked up, just briefly. Their eyes met. She looked back at her book immediately. But after a beat, he stood and walked toward her. No pretense, no hesitation. Emma braced herself for the awkward small talk of a stranger, but instead, he just gestured to the book. You like Plath? His voice was smooth. Warm. She smiled. I wouldn't be reading her a third time if I didn't. He smiled back, crooked, almost sheepish. I tried once. Too dense for me. I need things with more rhythm. Emma raised an eyebrow. Like. He reached into his coat and pulled out a pocket notebook. Inside, she glimpsed sheet music scribbles, something in C major. I write music, he said, holding it up. Julian. She hesitated, then extended her hand. Emma. They shook hands, but it lingered just long enough to feel like more than a gesture. The train whistle wailed in the distance. For the next 15 minutes, they talked about everything except themselves. Favorite authors, the curse of tourist-filled cafes, and whether music or words carried more heartbreak. When the train finally screeched into the station, they stepped onto the same car and sat across from each other. Two strangers moving through the Tuscan countryside with raindrops racing down the windows beside them. By the time they reached the next city, Emma knew the exact kind of piano Julian played, and Julian knew she always wrote her best stories in the early hours of the morning. They didn't say goodbye at the end of the ride. They just exchanged numbers on the back of a receipt, smiling like people who didn't yet know the weight of what they'd started. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sun broke through the clouds, and for the briefest moment, the world felt like a page from a story just beginning. Julian texted her the next day. Not something casual or clever, just a photo of a narrow street in Florence with the caption, "Thought this looked like a sentence you'd write." That was all it took. Their first official date wasn't really a date. Emma had just finished class, her hands still ink-stained from taking too many notes, when Julian met her outside the university with 2 espressos and a bag of almond biscotti. They sat on the stone steps of an old church, their shoulders brushing as students filtered by, and talked like they'd known each other longer than a week. Julian listened the way few people did, like he was tuning into her words with the precision of a musician finding the key of a song. Emma told him about her thesis on myth and modern literature, about the novel she had started and abandoned half a dozen times. She expected boredom. Instead, Julian asked, "Why'd you stop?" And she found herself admitting, "I got scared it wouldn't matter." That night, he sent her a voice memo, a gentle piano melody, barely a minute long. It had no lyrics, just something slow and deliberate, filled with pauses. The kind of song that felt like a breath you didn't know you were holding. Weeks passed. Their conversations unfolded in quiet cafes, long walks along the Arno, park benches where Emma read poetry aloud and Julian hummed along absently. They had little rituals, always ordering 1 coffee black and 1 sweet, taking turns paying with made-up games, touching pinkies under the table like they were kids again. Emma started writing again, small stories, half-finished scenes, all of them inspired by the strange beauty of Julian's presence in her life. He brought calm to her chaos, melody to her monologue. In return, she gave him something he hadn't known he needed, someone who saw the person behind the music. One evening, they stood on the Ponte Vecchio bridge, watching the river shimmer beneath the street lamps. The city felt suspended, golden and still. Julian turned to her, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "You're like prose that doesn't try too hard." Emma laughed. "What does that even mean?" "I mean," he said, smiling, "you're the kind of beautiful that doesn't need to announce itself." Then he kissed her, gently, without fanfare. And it felt like something inevitable, like punctuation at the end of a perfect line. They didn't say, "I love you," that night. They didn't need to. But somewhere, quietly, a seed had been planted. And it was already growing roots. It was late October when Julian surprised her with the weekend getaway. "A last-minute plan," he said, as casually as if they were going to the market. But when they stepped off the train and Emma saw the quiet lake town waiting for them, still, sunlit, untouched by the city's rush, she understood this was something he had thought about. Carefully, they stayed in a tiny stone cottage tucked into the hillside. The walls smelled like pine and dust, and the windows framed the lake like paintings. There was no TV, no signal, just a fireplace and each other. The first night, they cooked dinner together, burning the garlic and laughing until tears rolled down their cheeks. Later, wrapped in the same blanket, they drank cheap wine and told each other the kinds of stories that don't usually surface in daylight. Emma confessed how her parents' marriage taught her not to expect too much from love. Julian talked about the first time he played for an audience, how his hands had trembled until he closed his eyes and imagined no one was listening. When the fire dimmed to embers, he stood, crossed to his bag, and pulled out a small, battered keyboard, something portable, with keys that had seen better days. Emma watched as he plugged it in near the window. "I've been working on something," he said without turning around. Then he played. It wasn't a grand composition, not a dramatic sonata. It started with a single note, repeated softly, like a knock on a familiar door. Then another layered gently over it. The melody unfolded slowly, hesitant at first, then bolder, swelling like a rising tide. It was intimate, filled with pauses and breath, like it had been written between moments. Between kisses. Between glances. Halfway through, Emma realized she was holding her breath. When the final note hung in the air, Julian turned to her, nervous. "It's yours," he said simply. "The first time I heard you laugh, the way you touch your scarf when you're thinking, how you read like you're arguing with the page. I put all of it in there." Emma blinked, too full of feeling for words. She crossed to him, slowly, and kissed him without saying anything. That night, under the weight of quiet stars and a sky so full it seemed to bend toward them, they made love with the kind of tenderness that feels like belonging. The kind that doesn't ask questions, because the answers are already known in silence. Later, lying against his chest, Emma whispered, "I think I'm starting to believe in forever." Julian didn't answer immediately. He just kissed her hair. And outside, the lake mirrored the moon, perfect, still, and unaware of the coming storm. November brought a sudden chill to Florence, the kind that settled in your bones no matter how many layers you wore. Emma had just returned from class, balancing groceries in one hand and a stack of unread papers in the other, when she realized she'd forgotten her key. Julian's spare was still on the hook. She let herself into his apartment, something she'd done a dozen times before. The space was familiar now, the scent of cedarwood, the scattered scores on the coffee table, his wool coat draped over the back of a chair like he'd just stepped out. She smiled as she unpacked the groceries, humming the melody of the song he'd written for her. It was only when she went to grab a pen from his desk drawer that she saw it. A single envelope, cream-colored, worn at the edges, tucked beneath a mess of receipts and guitar picks, as though it had been forgotten or hidden. Her name wasn't on it. Isabel. The name struck her like cold water. Slanted handwriting, intimate, unmistakably feminine. The letter was unopened, sealed in red wax, the kind you use when you want something to matter. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, holding the envelope like it might combust. She didn't open it. Not then. Instead, she waited. Julian came home 2 hours later, guitar strapped across his back, cheeks pink from the cold. She met him at the door, the letter between her fingers. His smile vanished. "I didn't read it," Emma said quietly. "But I need to know why you still have it." Julian exhaled, ran a hand through his hair. He didn't lie. "Isabel was my fiancée. We were together for 4 years. She left last winter. No warning. Just disappeared." Emma swallowed. "And the letter?" "She sent it months after. I couldn't open it. I thought, if I did, it would drag me back." He looked at her then, eyes raw. "I met you, Emma. You made me feel like there was still music in the world. I didn't want to go back." She wanted to believe him. God, she did. But something about the way he didn't reach for her, didn't ask her to stay close, made her skin feel colder than the air outside. "Why keep it at all?" Julian hesitated. "Because I don't know if I forgave her. And I don't know if I'm ready to forget her." The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was small, painful in its simplicity. Emma set the letter down gently on the table, as if laying a ghost to rest. "I think I need some air," she said. She walked out without slamming the door. The cold bit at her face, sharp and honest. She walked for blocks without thinking, hands jammed into her coat, trying to untangle the knot in her chest. It wasn't that he had a past. It was that it hadn't really passed. And somewhere deep inside, something began to whisper that this story, this beautiful, fragile thing, might not be entirely hers. The following weeks felt brittle, like walking across glass. Emma and Julian went through the motions: coffee, quiet dinners, soft touches that felt a little too rehearsed. He smiled, but the music in his eyes had dulled. She kissed him, but her heart pulled back, wary. The letter had shifted something. It hadn't shattered them, but it had cracked the lens through which she saw him. Then came the weekend he disappeared. It began on a Friday evening. They had plans, just a simple night in with wine and a stack of old movies Julian had picked out. Emma had been looking forward to it all week. She arrived at his flat just after 6, carrying his favorite pastries and a bottle of red. He wasn't there. At first, she wasn't worried. Maybe he'd gotten caught up at the studio, maybe his phone had died. But as the hours crawled past and her calls went straight to voicemail, the edges of her mind began to fray. Midnight. 2 a.m. Still nothing. By morning, fear had curdled into dread. She called his friends. No one had seen him. She checked hospitals, walked past all their usual spots like some desperate scavenger. Her voice trembled when she left messages. "Julian, please just call me. I just want to know you're okay." He didn't. Emma didn't sleep. By Sunday afternoon, she was sitting on the floor of her apartment, hugging a blanket around her like armor, when the door finally buzzed. She opened it, and there he was. Disheveled. Pale. His eyes sunken with something she couldn't name. "Where were you?" she asked, voice sharp with panic and something darker. He stepped in slowly, like a man returning from war. "I needed space." "Space?" Her voice broke. "Julian, you vanished. I thought you were hurt. I thought. I know, I'm sorry." He ran his hands through his hair. I had to be alone for a bit. Sort some things out." Emma stared at him. "Were you with her?" He froze. And that hesitation, half a second but long enough, was its own answer. "I saw her," he admitted. "She showed up again. Unannounced. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't go looking for her." Emma felt her body stiffen, her fingers numb. "And you couldn't tell me? You couldn't call?" "I didn't know what to say." His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "I didn't want to lie to you. But you didn't want to tell me the truth either." Julian looked at her then, not pleading, not even sorry. Just tired. "She was a part of me for a long time," he said. "There are pieces I thought I buried. I guess I didn't." Emma nodded slowly. There were no tears. Just a deep, spreading cold inside her. Like something had wilted. "You said I helped you move on." "You did. Then why do you keep going back?" He didn't answer. And in that silence, Emma understood something irrevocable. She had fallen in love with a man still haunted by someone else's ghost. Not lost in memory, but still tethered. She stepped back, away from him. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," she whispered. Julian reached for her, but she flinched before he could touch her. And this time, it was Emma who left without looking back. December arrived, cruel and gray, with the kind of cold that seeped into stone and stayed there. Florence, dressed in faint holiday lights and cigarette smoke, moved around Emma like she wasn't part of it anymore. She floated through lectures, barely tasted her coffee, and wrote nothing. Not a line. Not a word. Her creativity had frozen with her heart. But she still checked her phone. Still hoped. Julian hadn't called since the weekend he vanished. Until now. A short message, sent without punctuation. "Can we talk?" She almost didn't respond. Almost. They met in the park near the old basilica, where the trees were bare and the air smelled like frost. Julian stood near the fountain, wrapped in his green coat, looking thinner, older somehow. There was no smile when he saw her. No attempt to pretend this was normal. "She's back," he said simply, as if Emma didn't already know. "I figured," Emma replied, wrapping her scarf tighter. "She reached out to me a few weeks before I met you," he admitted, his voice slow. "I didn't respond. But when I saw her again, I wasn't prepared for what it would feel like." Emma stared at him. "You said she left." "Without warning. She had a breakdown." He looked at the ground, shame flickering across his features. "She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder last year. She didn't tell anyone, she just ran. When she came back, she wanted to explain. And you believed her." He nodded. "And you still love her." This time he didn't nod. He didn't speak at all. That silence again. That devastating silence. Emma turned to leave. "Wait," Julian said. "I'm not with her." Emma laughed, sharp, not cruel. "But you're not really with me either, are you?" He looked at her helplessly. "I'm trying. I never meant to hurt you." "But you did." Her voice cracked. "You don't have space for two people in your heart, Julian. And you keep choosing the one who broke it." His eyes filled, but he didn't try to stop her when she walked away. He just watched her go, like a man realizing too late that something irreplaceable had slipped through his fingers. That night, Emma went home and opened her laptop. She didn't write a story, not yet. But she titled a blank document, "When We Were Almost Forever," and she sat in the silence, letting her grief bloom quietly like bruises under skin. Because sometimes love doesn't end with a fight. Sometimes it just dissolves. Quietly. Inevitable. Like snow that forgets to fall. January brought snow, soft and deceptive, like the city was trying to cover its own heartbreak in white. The holidays had passed in a blur, and Emma had stopped waiting for anything from Julian. She had started writing again, short stories that all somehow ended in silence or goodbye. Her friends noticed the change in her, but no one asked. And she didn't offer. Then, one rainy afternoon, she ducked into a bookstore to escape the cold. She wasn't looking for anything. Just warmth. Quiet. A place to disappear. But Florence, cruel in the way only a city of memory could be, didn't let her. Because on the shop's speakers, playing faintly above the rustle of pages and whispers, was a melody she knew too well. Her song. The one Julian had played for her in the lake cottage. The song that had made her believe in forever. She stood frozen between shelves as it reached the chorus, the lift, the pause, the descent. Every note exactly as she remembered. But then a shift. A bridge she didn't recognize. Something darker, slower. Not new old. A bookstore employee noticed her expression. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. "It's from Julian Hart's older recordings. One of his unreleased demos from years ago. Just got remastered." Emma blinked. "Wait, this was recorded before?" He nodded. "Yeah, it's been floating around on SoundCloud for a while. Originally written for his ex, I think? Isabel or something like that. One of those tragic love stories." Emma left the store without buying anything. She walked in the cold for a long time, letting the sting of betrayal numb her skin. The song, the one that had made her cry, that had made her trust, hadn't been hers at all. It wasn't composed in the hush of new love. It was recycled, repurposed, a relic of another woman's story. When she confronted Julian, she didn't scream. She just stood in his apartment doorway, eyes steady. "You lied." He looked confused. "Emma. The song. It wasn't mine." Julian's shoulders dropped, like the truth had finally caught up to him. "I reworked it," he said softly. "I changed parts. I thought it could be yours. But it wasn't. Not really. Was it?" He didn't answer. And that was all she needed. Emma stepped back. "You didn't love me," she said, not as an accusation, but a realization. You just needed someone to carry the silence Isabel left behind. Julian took a step forward, but she was already moving away. Calm. Done. She didn't take anything with her. Not the books. Not the photographs. Not the memories. Only the truth. That their love story had been borrowed. And she deserved something original. Something honest. Something hers. Spring returned to Florence quietly, without apology. The city woke up in soft colors, blush petals gathering on windowsills, green climbing back into the trees, sun-warmed stone glowing gold in the early evenings. But for Emma, everything was different now. The streets she once walked hand in hand with Julian were the same, yet not. She moved through them like a ghost who'd finally stopped looking for the person who made her one. It had been months since she last saw him. No more late-night calls. No letters. No attempts to patch together something that had never truly belonged to her in the first place. But something had changed inside her. The pain no longer pressed like a weight. It lingered instead like an old bruise, tender but no longer breaking skin. And in the quiet hours of the morning, with coffee and her laptop open beside her, she began to write again. Not fragments. Not pages she would delete later. A book. She called it When We Were Almost Forever. It was fiction, but only technically. The characters were hers, but the emotions were real. She didn't romanticize it. She didn't paint herself as a victim or him as a villain. She wrote it exactly as it was. Two people colliding at the wrong time, mistaking emotional hunger for love. A relationship built not on lies, but on ghosts neither could name until it was too late. The novel was published quietly by a small press in Milan. She didn't expect much. But it found its way, word of mouth, quiet acclaim. People cried at the ending. Some wrote her letters. "It felt like you wrote what I never had the words for," one woman said. "Thank you for reminding me heartbreak can be honest, not just dramatic." Then, one quiet afternoon, Julian walked into a bookstore in Rome. He wasn't looking for anything in particular. Just wandering. Searching, maybe, for a sound that had long since left his hands. And there it was. Her name on the cover. When We Were Almost Forever. He picked it up, heart stumbling in his chest. Flipped to the first page. He read the entire thing in 2 sittings. Alone, surrounded by silence. When he reached the final line, "We were the kind of almost that leaves you wondering what it could have been, even as you close the door forever." He closed the book, eyes burning, and pressed it to his chest. He didn't call her. Didn't write. He understood. Emma had moved on, not in the dramatic way people scream about in poems, but in the quiet, brave way that only the deeply hurt ever learn. She never saw Julian again. But she did see herself, clearer now than ever before. Not the woman waiting at a train station. Not the lover bathed in moonlight. Not the girl with borrowed music in her ears. Just Emma. Whole. Alone, yes. But never unfinished. And some stories, she had learned, are meant to end in silence. Not because love wasn't real, but because it wasn't enough. Not forever. Just almost.